Hey guys, what's up? Roman here from Tech Guides, and today is one of my favorite days. It's PC building day. And more specifically, in this video, I'm going to build my new gaming, editing and rendering rig. So this is going to be my personal PC rig upgrade. And I'm also going to walk you through all of the different components that I selected for this build. Now, before I'm going to dig into the different parts that I selected for this build, I'd like to mention that none of them are actually sponsored for this video. So I bought each of these components myself with my own money, and therefore also had the freedom to decide which kind of components I wanted to select for this personal build. So I really hope this video gives you value in terms of my thought process of which kind of components I selected for this personal build. And I hope with this video you'll also find some guidance in case you're also thinking about upgrading to an Alder Lake system in the near future. Right, so let's go through each of the different components. I'm trying to do this as quick as possible while still walking you through all of the different thought processes that I went through in selecting the different parts. So we're going to start with the CPU, and as I mentioned before, I'm going to be upgrading to an Alder Lake system. So this is an i9-12900K F. Now, you might have noticed that this doesn't look very flashy in this little plastic bag here, and the reason why is that in Switzerland we can buy these tray versions of these CPUs, which are about $50 less expensive than the ones that are boxed. So that's the reason why this is just in a little plastic bag. And then I also decided to go for the KF version. So this is the version without the integrated GPU because obviously, well, we're going to have a better GPU than what we get on this chip. Now, the reason why I went for the 12900KF instead of some of the lower tier CPUs of the Alder Lake architecture is that in my previous system I had an i9-12900K. So that already had 8 cores, and because this is the only CPU that also has 8 performance cores, obviously it also has 8 efficient cores, so it's even much better. But comparatively to the other CPUs, I didn't think that this would provide such a big upgrade path compared to the i9-19900K that I already had in my old system. And because I'm obviously using this thing to render YouTube videos, the more cores, the better. Now, because this CPU can be a bit of a space heater, I also decided to go for a new AIO, and more specifically I selected the Aorus Waterforce X360, so this is a 360mm AIO, a pretty beefy AIO cooler which has a very nice LCD display on the front. So hopefully with this 360mm AIO cooler I'm going to be able to keep the temperatures of the i9-12900K in check. Now, with Alder Lake, obviously we moved to LGA 1700, so it means that we have more pins on the bottom. It means that the old motherboards are obviously not compatible, so we have to move to the Z690 architecture of motherboards. Now, 690 motherboards come obviously in 2 variants. So we have the DDR4 version, which is the one I have, as well as the DDR5 versions, which support the newer memory standard. Now, the reason why I went with DDR4 instead of DDR5 are essentially twofold. So first of all, availability of DDR5 memory modules in Switzerland is essentially non-existent. And if you find some on second-hand marketplaces, they might cost more than a GPU. And considering that I really wanted to have the same amount of RAM as I had in my old system, which was 64 gigs, because I'm obviously rendering videos for YouTube, the decision was really kind of a no-brainer because I already had 64 gigs of DDR4 that I could just recycle for this new system. So these are each 16GB RAM modules clocked at 3600 MHz at CL17, so they're not the high-end memory modules, but they're plenty fast for gaming, they're plenty fast for rendering, and on top of that they look absolutely fantastic with the RGB strip at the top. Now, obviously with DDR4, the choice of different motherboards available really shrinks a lot on the Z690 architecture. And that's actually something that I found was a bit annoying. I couldn't really select the motherboard that had all of the top specs that I wanted because such a motherboard just doesn't exist. All of the really high-end and top specs motherboards for Z690 are DDR5. But anyways, when I was shopping for a motherboard, I was looking for high phase count, high amperage power stages, and a fast gigabit connection. Since I'm using this as my editing rig, but my files are on my home server, I really need a fast link between the two systems. And ideally I was looking for a board that supports 10 gigabit Ethernet because my home server also has a 10 gigabit Ethernet slot-in card. But unfortunately none of these DDR4 boards really come with 10 gig Ethernet. So that's why I went for this board. Essentially it had all of the features that I wanted. 2.5 gigabit Ethernet which is still a bit faster than 1 gigabit Ethernet. And it also supports up to 4 PCIe 4 NVMe slots, of which I will actually use 3. So we have the OS drive, which is going to be a Samsung 980 Pro. This is a PCIe 4 drive, so it's going to be blistering fast, 7,000 megabytes per second. That's absolutely mad. It's also 1 terabyte of size, so this should be also plenty for the games that I play on a regular basis. Then besides that, I also have some old NVMe SSDs that I was already using in my previous build. So these are both 1 terabyte PCIe 3 NVMe SSDs, so a little bit less fast than the OS drive, but really I don't think that's going to be a problem at all, because I'm going to be using one of these 1 terabyte drives as a recording drive, so for all of the gameplay recordings, and then the other terabyte drive, I'm actually not quite sure what I'm going to be using it for. Maybe some more games that I don't play very regularly, or maybe just some other files, I'm not quite sure yet. As power supply, I'll be using my old Corsair HX850i. I use this power supply in my old system. It's an 850 watt titanium graded power supply, so it's extremely efficient and it's more than plenty of juice for the system that I'm building here, and there's not really much of a point to upgrade this for this new build. Finally, let's also talk about the most dreaded component whenever you're trying to build a PC as of recently, which is the GPU. And in my case, I got a GTX 3070, also by Gigabyte. And the reason why I selected this specific model, brand and make is essentially because it was available in Switzerland for almost MSRP, well, probably 1.5 times MSRP. But I got this for about $750 US, I guess, which is a steal. I mean, these go for like twice the price on second-hand marketplaces here in Switzerland. So I was really lucky to get my hands on one of these. And frankly, I didn't feel like shilling out and maybe paying 3 times the price of this for a 3080 or 3080 Ti, which was also available here in Switzerland. But honestly, at these kind of prices, I really rather just wait for the next generation of GPUs to launch, and then either some of these GPUs will get cheaper, so you might buy them at the more reasonable prices, so maybe $1,000 rather than $1,800, or even upgrade then immediately to the 4000 series GPUs that might even already launch in this year. And then finally, we have to talk about the case that I selected for this build. I'm really excited for this. So this is the Lian O11 Dynamic Evo. So this is a very recently released case, a updated version of the O11 that probably everybody and their mother has already built a computer in. This is actually the white version of the case because I thought it really looked good. And you might notice that I don't really have many white parts here, but I figured that I would just go for a black and white build in today's video. Now, in terms of cooling, just very briefly, I bought 3 QL120 RGB fans by Corsair. These are obviously absolute RGB puke, so we have RGB on the front and the back of the fans. And then I still had 2 LL140 RGB fans. They're only lit on one side. So if you do see the back of your fans in your case, then go for the QL versions. Whereas on the other hand, if you don't see the back, then it's a complete waste. These one, just go for the LL instead. And then the final piece of today's build is a USB 3 drive, a flash drive where I already have Windows 10 preloaded. Yes, I'm going to be using Windows 10. No, I don't go for Windows 11. Yes, I know that P-cores, E-cores are probably better supported on Windows 11, but I was early adopter of Windows Vista and it was an absolute pain. So I'm not going to be early adopter of another operating system by Windows. I'm going to stick with Windows 10 because Windows 11 is just not matured enough, in my opinion, in order for the regular consumer or people who are daily driving a PC should be using Windows 11. And with that, it's about time to put everything together and build this system. Alright everyone, so the build is somewhat complete. You might have noticed that I did not put in the second and third NVMe SSD because I wanted to test this first just with the empty SSD, so we're not going to get any issues with the old installation of Windows. And I also didn't really tie up everything perfectly just yet because in case that I need to take stuff apart again, now I don't want to have it perfectly optimized just yet. But yeah, it was a bit more tedious than I anticipated with all of the different fans. So we have these 3 fans at the bottom, they're all RGB. We have the 3 fans on the radiator, which by the way I purposely put on the back because I want them to push through my radiator instead of pull, because this gives me a little bit better cooling. Obviously I won't see the nice RGB on them, but then again I might just put more fans in the front really. I also had my 2 140s at the top, which are only lit on one side. So these here at the bottom, they are lit on both sides, and this is why you can mount them this way, so they suck up air into the case, and they're actually also nicely illuminated. Now, one thing that I was very surprised with is that the Aorus RTX3070 Waterforce doesn't come with a fan header. So there's only SATA and USB headers on this thing, so I had to plug in these fans here into the CPU fan header, otherwise the system simply wouldn't boot. So that's a bit peculiar, and I'm not sure if I overlooked something, but yeah, apparently there's no fan headers on that AIO, which is a bit surprising to me. But without any further ado, let's hope that we connected everything correctly, and let's hope that we get into the post. Okay, so we don't have any flames coming out of it, so that's good. Wow, this RGB here is insanely bright. Wow. Okay, it's doing the post cycles. That's totally normal after first installing the CPU. Oh, it's upside down. Nice. That's one of the nice features of this screen. You can just rotate it such that it will fit any orientation that you put this AIO in. Pretty neat. Okay, that's decent. Oh, wait. We got the post screen. Oh, and we're inside of the BIOS. Lovely. Oh my god. It would have been so annoying if I didn't put everything together correctly. But as you can see, we're in BIOS. I can now go ahead and put all the side panels back on, figure out why these fans aren't lit. But the ones at the top are, which is interesting because they're both in the same fan hub from Corsair. So that's a bit fishy. But this looks nice. Lots of RGB. It's gonna look absolutely smacking when these are also lit up. And it looks like everything is set up properly. Lovely!